we're going to look at an example of how problematic the discourse around consciousness and the unconscious is. You may have heard of subliminal advertising, the idea that there could be hidden messages in films. This captured a popular imagination in the 1950s and 60s. The idea was that unscrupulous marketers could be hiding secret messages in things. Although back then it wasn't so much unscrupulous marketers, because marketers were probably more popular then. You've probably heard of satanic messages hidden in rock music if you play it backwards, for example. These are kind of nutty ideas with a grain of truth in them. Not Satan and Led Zeppelin, but let's have a look at subliminal advertising. You can see here, you go to the movies in the 1950s and then suddenly one frame pops up, like in the experiment we just saw. It says, hungry, eat popcorn, and it goes so quick you don't even notice it, but you're sitting there and going, I could really do with some popcorn now. What's the story of this? Well, it has a story. In 1957, this guy, James Vickeray, pulled up a news conference to announce that he had invented a powerful new way to influence consumers, subliminal projection. He was going to flash these messages very briefly on screen while people watched a movie, such that they wouldn't notice it, but they would still be affected by it. Now, the companies went nuts for this. This sounds like a great idea. Like, we can make millions if we can do this. And everyone bought into it. The thing is, though, he just made it up. As so often. He just made this up out of the thin air. He had no methods, no results were obtained, there was no science behind it. But the idea caught on, and it spawned whole industries. And these days, if you go into any bookstore, you'll find tons of books that lay similar claim to influence other people, to hide hidden messages in things. You can see some examples of them there. There's tons of this. Because the very idea that marketers can influence you to do something is so commercially effective. It doesn't have to be psychologically effective. It's commercially effective. That people will roll out the products and they'll promise you that you can lose weight, that you can seduce others, you can get rich quick, you can be more effective and more successful. There's a website called realsubliminal.com. Satanic messages in rock music. One proud entry here into the gobbledygook is a field called Neurolinguistic Programming, which has no neuroscience, no linguistics, and no programming in it, but represents attempts to influence other people using the techniques of stage magicians, actually. So, should we just dismiss subliminal advertising? Notice that it did capture the popular imagination and it led to the development of huge amounts of bullshit industry and services. So, subliminal advertising in the narrow sense was a hoax. But there is a grain of truth in it, which is that we are unconsciously affected by our environment all the time. The very idea that you could be consciously aware of things that affect you is kind of nonsense. You remember when we were looking at the work of the behaviorists, and Skinner in particular, we saw that behaviorists developed very powerful techniques for shaping behavior in both animals and humans. And we mentioned that most of them had gone into marketing when behaviorism was no longer the most popular form of psychology in universities. It's not only marketing, though. For example, during the pandemic, there was a strong need to influence people's behavior, to get people to socially distance, to get people to wear masks, and all kinds of thought was put into how do we influence people to do this? How do we change their behavior using, whether they're conscious or not, of it? So behavioral shaping is very real. It's a real field with consequences in public health and in marketing, at least. It's not necessarily either conscious or unconscious, but you can see that having, shall we say, naive models of who we are and how we're influenced is not necessarily in our best interest.